body is not a fragile machine assembled from parts that inevitably wear out and fail. It is a living, adaptive system whose primary purpose is survival through change. From the moment life begins, biology assumes damage will occur. Cells divide knowing that errors are possible. Tissues form knowing that stress will shape them, and systems organize themselves around feedback rather than perfection. This is why repair is woven into the very architecture of the body. DNA carries not only instructions for growth, but also layers of error correction. Proteins are built with the expectation that they will be folded, unfolded, reused, or dismantled. Even at the microscopic level, life does not aim to avoid disruption. It prepares for it. What we often call health is not the absence of stress or injury, but the capacity to respond intelligently when stress appears. A bone becomes stronger not because it is protected from load, but because it is exposed to it in manageable doses. Muscle fibers grow not by avoiding strain, but by breaking down and rebuilding in response to it. The immune system does not learn by living in isolation. It learns through exposure, memory, and recalibration. The body evolves its strength through dialogue with its environment, not through static preservation. This is why complete comfort leads to weakness, while appropriate challenge leads to resilience. Adaptation is the language the body speaks fluently. It listens continuously to chemical signals, mechanical forces, emotional cues, and energetic availability, adjusting itself in real time. Hormones rise and fall, blood flow redistributes. Tissues stiffen or soften depending on demand. None of this is random. It is regulated, prioritized, and context-dependent. When resources are plentiful and threats are low, the body invests in maintenance. When danger or scarcity is perceived, it shifts focus toward immediate survival. This flexibility is not a flaw. It is a reason humans have endured across wildly different environments and conditions. Many people believe that aging is proof that the body is slowly breaking down beyond repair. But this view misunderstands what aging truly represents. Aging is not the disappearance of repair mechanisms. It is a gradual change in how repair is allocated. The body becomes more selective, more cautious, more conservative with its energy. It still knows how to heal, but it demands clearer signals that healing is worth the cost. When those signals are absent, repair slows. When they return consistently, repair reemerges in ways that often surprise those who assumed it was gone forever. This is why long-neglected bodies can respond positively to supportive change even after decades. Tissues remember how to function. Cells retain blueprints for renewal. Neural circuits remain capable of reorganization. Biology does not erase its own knowledge easily. It archives it. The body carries forward patterns that once helped it survive, even if those patterns later become limiting. Pain, stiffness, fatigue, and metabolic imbalance are often not signs of failure, but signs of adaptation to prolonged conditions that demanded caution rather than restoration. Seeing the body as adaptive reframes symptoms entirely. Pain is not merely damage. It is information. Fatigue is not laziness. It is energy budgeting. Inflammation is not always an enemy. It is part of a coordinated response to perceived threat or injury. When these signals persist, it does not mean the system is broken. It means the system believes it must stay protective. The body does not sabotage itself. It does exactly what it thinks is necessary to keep you alive under the circumstances it perceives. The idea of fragility comes from treating the body as an object rather than a process. Objects degrade. Processes evolve. The human body is closer to a conversation than a structure, constantly negotiating between what it has experienced and what it expects next. When the future feels uncertain or dangerous, it prepares defensively. When the future feels stable and supportive, it invests in repair, growth, and refinement. This negotiation happens below conscious awareness, guided by nervous system signaling, hormonal rhythms, immune intelligence, and metabolic sensing. One of the most overlooked aspects of this adaptability is patience. Biological systems do not respond instantly to isolated events. They respond to patterns. A single good night of sleep may not reverse years of exhaustion, but repeated nights send a powerful message. A single nutritious meal does not heal a damaged metabolism, but consistency changes cellular expectations. The body updates its behavior not based on intention, but based on reliability. It asks not what happened once, but what keeps happening. This is why extreme interventions so often fail. They are loud but short-lived signals. The body notices them, responds briefly, then returns to its established strategy. Adaptation requires trust, and trust is built through repetition. When supportive signals arrive consistently, the body slowly reallocates resources, reduces unnecessary defenses, and reopens repair pathways that have been placed on hold. This process is quiet. It does not announce itself dramatically. It unfolds gradually, often beneath conscious perception, until one day strength feels more accessible, pain less dominant, energy more stable. The body's intelligence is distributed, not centralized. There is no single command center deciding how to heal. Instead, trillions of cells follow local rules that collectively produce global outcomes. Each cell responds to its immediate environment, adjusting gene expression, metabolism, and behavior accordingly. Healing emerges from coordination, not control. This is why no single intervention works universally, and why context matters so deeply. The same stimulus can heal one person and stress another, depending on their internal and external conditions. Understanding this removes the pressure to force outcomes. You do not need to overpower the body into health. You need to create conditions that make health the most efficient option. When safety increases, repair becomes economical. When energy stabilizes, maintenance resumes. When signals align, adaptation moves in constructive direction. The body does not resist healing. It resists unpredictability. Even after injury or illness, the body rarely abandons function entirely. It compensates. It reroutes. It finds alternate strategies to maintain movement, circulation, and balance. These compensations are not mistakes. They are temporary solutions that become permanent only when better options fail to appear. When new options become available, the body can unlearn as well as it learned. Plasticity does not disappear with age. It becomes more selective, more dependent on clear and consistent cues. This perspective carries a subtle but profound compassion. It acknowledges that the body has always been doing its best with the information it had. It shifts blame away from the individual and toward understanding the system. It recognizes that resilience is not about toughness, but about adaptability. A system that can change survives longer than one that tries to remain the same. When we treat the body as adaptive rather than fragile, we stop asking why it is failing us and start asking what it has been responding to. We become curious instead of critical. We listen instead of override. This curiosity opens space for cooperation, and cooperation is where healing accelerates. The body is not waiting to collapse. It is waiting for conditions that justify investment in renewal, and when those conditions appear with enough consistency, the adaptive machinery that has always been present begins to reorganize itself again, not dramatically or perfectly, but intelligently, steadily, and in alignment with the deepest biological logic of survival and continuity, rather than breakdown or loss or finality. In biology, damage is not an anomaly. It is a given. Life does not unfold in sterile conditions. And the human body evolved with the expectation that cells will be stressed, tissues will be strained, and systems will occasionally falter. From the moment a cell begins to function, it is exposed to friction, oxidation, pressure, and uncertainty. Rather than attempting to eliminate damage, the body learned how to interpret it, respond to it, and integrate it into a larger strategy for survival. This is why symptoms exist. They are not random malfunctions or punishments for imperfection. They are expressions of an intelligent system signaling that adaptation is underway. When pain appears, it is often interpreted as proof that something has gone wrong beyond repair. Yet pain, at its core, is information. It is the nervous system's way of highlighting an area where attention, protection, or change is required. Inflammation, similarly, is frequently viewed as an enemy, but it is one of the most ancient and coordinated responses the body possesses. It increases blood flow, recruits immune cells, and alters local chemistry to manage threat and initiate repair. The problem is rarely that these responses occur. The problem arises when they persist longer than necessary, often because the conditions that triggered them never truly resolved. Fatigue follows the same logic. It is not a moral failure or a sign of weakness. It is a budgeting decision made by the body when energy demands exceed predictable supply. The brain, muscles, immune system, and organs all compete for resources, and fatigue emerges when conservation becomes the most rational choice. This does not mean the body is broken. It means the system has decided that rest, reduction, or withdrawal is safer than continued output under current conditions. Seen this way, fatigue becomes a message asking for recalibration rather than condemnation. Symptoms make sense when viewed through the lens of adaptation. The body is constantly comparing current input with past experience, asking whether the present resembles a threat it has encountered before. If it does, protective strategies are deployed quickly, sometimes excessively. A stiff back, a tense neck, a sensitive gut, or a racing heart may all represent learned responses that once helped manage risk. Over time, these responses can outlive their usefulness, but they persist not because the body is malfunctioning, but because it is loyal to strategies that previously ensured survival. This loyalty is often misunderstood as dysfunction. When symptoms linger, people assume something is irreversibly damaged. In reality, the system may simply be stuck in a protective loop, continuing to apply the same solution because it has not received sufficient evidence that conditions have changed. Biology is cautious. It prefers familiar protection over unfamiliar freedom. To release a symptom, the body must be convinced not through words or intentions, but through consistent, lived signals that safety has increased and demand has stabilized. Consider how the immune system behaves after repeated exposure to the stressors. It does not simply turn off once a threat is gone. It adjusts its sensitivity. In some cases, it becomes hypervigilant, reacting strongly to minor triggers because past experience taught it that danger was frequent or unpredictable. Allergies, chronic inflammation, and autoimmune-like patterns often reflect this heightened alertness. The system is not attacking randomly. It is responding according to an internal model shaped by history. That model can be updated, but only gradually as new experiences demonstrate reliability and safety. The same principle applies to pain that persists long after an injury is healed. Tissue damage may resolve, but the nervous system retains a memory of threat. It continues to amplify signals from that area, not because damage remains, but because protection has become habitual. This does not mean the pain is imagined. It is very real, but its source is no longer structural failure. It is an adaptive alarm that has not yet learned it can stand down. Education, movement, calm exposure, and trust-building experiences can all help rewrite this internal narrative, not by forcing change, but by gently presenting new evidence. Symptoms also emerge when the body is overwhelmed by complexity. Modern life introduces mismatches between biology and environment that our systems did not evolve to handle efficiently. Irregular sleep, constant stimulation, emotional strain, poor recovery, and nutritional inconsistency all send mixed signals. The body responds by simplifying. It reduces output, increases sensitivity, and narrows its focus to what it perceives as most urgent. Symptoms are often the visible edge of the simplification process, showing where trade-offs are being made. Understanding symptoms as communication changes how healing is approached. Instead of trying to silence signals, we begin to ask what they are responding to. Instead of declaring war on discomfort, we explore its context. This does not mean ignoring medical evaluation or serious pathology. It means recognizing that even when a diagnosis exists, the body's response to that condition still follows adaptive logic. Treatment becomes more effective when it aligns with that logic rather than fighting against it. One of the most profound shifts occurs when individuals stop viewing their bodies as adversaries. Self-criticism amplifies stress signals, reinforcing the very patterns that sustain symptoms. Compassion, on the other hand, alters nervous system tone. When the body senses understanding rather than threat, defensive intensity can soften. This is not philosophical abstraction. It is physiological reality. Emotional states influence hormonal output, immune behavior, and neural firing patterns. Kindness is not just comforting. It is instructive. Symptoms often cluster because systems are interconnected. A stressed nervous system alters digestion. Impaired digestion affects energy availability. Reduced energy influences mood and movement. Movement patterns feed back into pain perception. What appears as multiple unrelated problems is often one adaptive strategy expressed across different domains. The body prefers coherence. When coherence is disrupted, it responds globally rather than locally. Healing, therefore, rarely occurs in isolation. It emerges when enough variables shift together to change the overall pattern. This interconnectedness explains why addressing one area can produce unexpected improvements elsewhere. Improving sleep can reduce pain. Regulating breathing can calm digestion. Gentle movement can stabilize mood. These effects are not mysterious. They reflect the body's integrated design. When one signal becomes more predictable, others recalibrate in response. Symptoms diminish not because they were suppressed, but because they are no longer needed to communicate urgency. The idea that symptoms equal failure is deeply ingrained, yet biologically inaccurate. Failure implies lack of purpose. Symptoms are purposeful. They may be uncomfortable, disruptive, or frightening, but they are meaningful. They tell a story about load, history, and expectation. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. Interpreting them wisely often does. This interpretation requires patience, because adaptive systems do not reverse overnight. They require repeated confirmation that new conditions are stable. Healing accelerates when curiosity replaces judgment. Asking what the body is responding to opens space for insight. That insight guides action more effectively than fear ever could. The body responds not to ideals, but to lived reality. It does not need perfection to relax its defenses. It needs consistency. When symptoms are met with understanding and steady support, their message changes, and eventually, their volume can decrease. Even severe or chronic symptoms rarely indicate that adaptation has failed completely. More often, they show that adaptation has gone too far in one direction, prioritizing protection at the expense of flexibility. The solution is not to eliminate protection, but to rebalance it. Flexibility returns when the system feels safe enough to experiment again. This safety is built through repeated, gentle experiences that contradict the expectation of harm. The body is always listening. It listens to movement, to rest, to nutrition, to emotional tone, to social connection. Symptoms are part of that listening process. They are the body speaking in the only language it has. When we learn to hear that language without panic, without blame, and without force, we begin participating in our own repair rather than obstruct it. The body does not demand immediate understanding. It responds to sustained change. When communication improves, adaptation follows, and what once felt like dysfunction gradually reveals itself as an intelligent response waiting to be guided in a healthier direction rather than silenced or feared or resisted. The nervous system is the body's master interpreter, constantly scanning the internal and external world to decide one essential question: am I safe, or must I protect myself? Long before conscious thought emerges, this system evaluates signals from the environment, from memories, from bodily sensations, and from emotional tone. Based on this evaluation, it allocates resources. When safety is perceived, energy flows toward growth, digestion, immunity, repair, and learning. When threat is perceived, even subtly, priorities shift toward defense, vigilance, and survival. Healing does not stop because the body forgets how to repair itself. It slows because the nervous system decides that repair is too risky under current conditions. Stress itself is not the enemy. Stress is a normal and necessary biological signal that mobilizes energy and sharpens focus. The problem arises when stress becomes chronic, unresolved, or ambiguous. When the nervous system cannot predict when a threat will end, it remains activated. This sustained activation alters physiology at every level. Heart rate variability decreases. Breathing becomes shallow. Digestion slows. Immune responses shift, and muscle tone increases. None of these changes are random. They are protective adaptations designed to keep the organism ready for action. The cost of this readiness is that repair mechanisms are deprioritized. In a prolonged state of alert, the body behaves as if resources must be conserved for an emergency that never quite arrives. Inflammation becomes more likely to linger. Tissue regeneration slows. Sleep becomes fragmented. Pain sensitivity increases. These changes are not signs that the system is failing. They are signs that it is obeying instructions. The nervous system is following its mandate to keep the organism alive, even if that mandate compromises comfort or long-term health. Survival always outranks optimization in biological decision-making. One of the most important misunderstandings about healing is the belief that conscious desire alone can trigger it. While intention matters, the nervous system responds primarily to experience, not a thought. You cannot convince it with logic that you are safe. You must demonstrate safety through consistent, embodied signals. Slow breathing, predictable routines, gentle movement, restorative sleep, and supportive social interaction all speak the language of the nervous system far more clearly than words ever could. When these signals repeat, the system begins to relax its grip. The nervous system operates on pattern recognition. It learns from repetition. If stress has been present for months or years, the system adapts to that reality by recalibrating what it considers normal. Elevated muscle tension, heightened pain sensitivity, digestive irregularity, and emotional reactivity become baseline states. This does not mean the system is broken. It means it has learned. Learning can always be updated, but updates require new, consistent data. A single calm moment is helpful, but it does not outweigh years of vigilance. Repetition is how the nervous system rewrites its expectations. This explains why people often feel frustrated when they attempt to heal but see slow progress. The nervous system is cautious by design. It does not reverse protective strategies quickly, because doing so prematurely could be dangerous. It waits for proof. Proof comes in the form of stability. When the body experiences regular sleep, manageable stress, and reliable recovery, the nervous system begins to lower its guard. Only then does it allow energy to be redirected toward repair. The relationship between stress and healing is deeply tied to the autonomic nervous system, which regulates involuntary functions such as heart rate, digestion, immune activity, and hormonal balance. This system has two primary modes that work together: mobilization and restoration. Mobilization prepares the body for action. Restoration supports repair and maintenance. Both are essential. Problems arise when mobilization dominates for too long without sufficient restoration. In such cases, the body is never given the physiological permission to heal. Chronic stress narrows perception. The nervous system becomes focused on immediate threats and loses sensitivity to subtle signals of safety. This narrowing affects not only the body, but also the mind. Creativity decreases, patience diminishes, and emotional regulation becomes more difficult. These changes feed back into the body, reinforcing the stress response. Healing becomes difficult not because the body lacks capacity, but because the system is locked into a self-reinforcing loop of vigilance. Importantly, the nervous system does not distinguish well between physical and psychological threats. A perceived loss of control, unresolved conflict, or persistent uncertainty can trigger the same defensive responses as physical danger. Muscles tense, cortisol rises, digestion alters. From a biological perspective, threat is threat. This is why emotional stress can manifest physically, and why addressing only the body without considering the nervous system often yields limited results. Restoration begins when the nervous system detects cues of safety. These cues are surprisingly simple, yet profoundly effective. Slow, rhythmic breathing signals that immediate action is not required. Gentle, non-threatening movement reassures the body that mobility is possible without harm. Warmth, touch, and calm environments reduce sensory overload. Consistent routines reduce uncertainty. Each of these signals tells the nervous system that the present moment is manageable. Over time, these moments accumulate, and the system begins to shift its baseline. This shift is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It shows up quietly, perhaps as deeper sleep, slightly reduced pain, or improved digestion. These changes indicate that restoration pathways are reopening. As they do, healing processes that were paused begin to resume. Immune regulation improves. Tissue repair becomes more efficient. Inflammation resolves more effectively. The body did not suddenly learn how to heal. It simply received permission to do what it has always known how to do. Understanding the nervous system's role in healing also reframes setbacks. A flare-up of symptoms does not mean progress has been lost. Often, it means the system is testing boundaries. As vigilance decreases, sensitivity can temporarily increase. This is not regression. It is recalibration. The nervous system is renegotiating its relationship with the body and the environment. With patience and consistency, these fluctuations settle. Safety is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of recovery. The nervous system tolerates stress well when it is followed by adequate restoration. Problems arise when stress accumulates without release. Healing does not require eliminating all stress from life, which is neither possible nor desirable. It requires ensuring that stress is balanced with signals that restore equilibrium. This balance allows the nervous system to remain flexible rather than rigid. One of the most powerful aspects of nervous system regulation is that it can be influenced at any age. Plasticity does not disappear over time. It becomes more selective. The system still learns, but it demands clearer evidence. Gentle. Consistent practices often outperform intense interventions because they align with how the nervous system updates its expectations. Small signals repeated daily build trust. Trust allows relaxation. Relaxation allows repair. The nervous system also responds strongly to social cues. Feeling seen, heard, and supported sends powerful signals of safety. Isolation, on the other hand, is interpreted as vulnerability. This is why connection can be profoundly healing and why loneliness exacerbates illness. Humans evolved as social organisms. The nervous system expects relational safety as part of its healing environment. Even brief moments of genuine connection can shift physiological state. Healing, then, is not something that happens to the body alone. It happens through the nervous system's ongoing assessment of life. When that assessment shifts from threat to safety, even partially, the body follows. Muscles release, breath deepens, digestion resumes, and repair processes quietly reactivate. The system does not need to be forced. It needs to be reassured. When we understand healing through the lens of the nervous system, the focus moves away from fixing isolated symptoms and toward creating conditions that support regulation. This approach is not passive. It requires attention, patience, and consistency, but it aligns with biology rather than opposing it. The nervous system is not an obstacle to healing. It is the gateway. When it feels safe enough to stand down, the body's innate capacity for repair emerges naturally, steadily, and intelligently, guided not by urgency or fear, but by the quiet logic of the system that has survived by learning when to defend and when to restore and when to allow life to rebuild itself from within rather than remain locked in endless vigilance or tension or strain. The human body does not experience time in a rigid, linear way the mind often does. While we tend to measure change in years and decades, biology measures change in signals, patterns, and repetition. A tissue does not know how long it has been weak. It only knows what inputs it is receiving now. A metabolic system does not remember age as a number. It remembers rhythms, availability, and demand. This is why the idea that the past permanently defines a body is misleading. History influences the present, but it does not imprison it. Biology is always updating its expectations based on current conditions. Every cell lives in the present moment. It responds to oxygen levels, nutrient availability, mechanical load, hormonal signals, and neural input as they occur. When those signals change consistently, the cell changes with them. A muscle fiber that has been inactive for years still contains a machinery for strength. A bone that has lost density still responds to load. A nervous system shaped by long stress can still learn calm. The speed of these changes often surprises people because they assume long-standing patterns require equally long periods to reverse. In reality, the body does not undo time. It updates strategy. This adaptive timing explains why meaningful improvements can occur in weeks even after years of dysfunction. When signals shift clearly and consistently, biology responds efficiently. Circulation improves quickly when movement resumes. Insulin sensitivity can change within days when energy balance stabilizes. Inflammatory markers can decline rapidly when the nervous system exits chronic threat mode. These changes are not miraculous. They reflect a system that has been waiting for reliable information that conditions have changed. The past matters, but not in the way people fear. The body does not cling to suffering out of stubbornness. It clings to patterns that once protected it. When a new pattern proves safer or more efficient, the body is willing to let go of the old one. The challenge is not convincing the body intellectually, but demonstrating change experientially. Consistency is what allows the body to trust the present more than the past. This is why short bursts of effort often fail to produce lasting change. The body interprets them as anomalies, not as new reality. A week of rest after years of exhaustion may feel good, but it does not yet rewrite expectations. A month of movement after years of inactivity is noticed, but not fully trusted. The body asks a simple question repeatedly. Will this continue? When the answer becomes yes through repetition, adaptation accelerates. Biological systems are conservative with change because change carries risk. To abandon an old strategy, the body must believe the new one will not increase danger. This belief is built through steady exposure. Gentle movement repeated daily is more persuasive than intense exercise done sporadically. Regular sleep times are more convincing than occasional long rest. Predictable nourishment reassures the system more than extreme restriction followed by excess. The body is not impressed by intensity. It is convinced by reliability. Neuroplasticity follows the same principle. The brain continuously updates its maps of the body and the environment. Pain pathways, movement patterns, and emotional responses are not fixed traits. They are learned responses shaped by experience. When experience changes consistently, neural wiring follows. This is why fear-based pain can soften with gradual, safe movement, and why confidence can return after long absence. The brain does not erase the past, but it builds over it. The concept of being too old to change misunderstands how biology works. Aging influences speed and efficiency, but it does not eliminate adaptability. Older systems may require clearer signals and longer consistency, but they still respond. Muscles still hypertrophy. Bones still remodel. Metabolism still adjusts. The difference is not possibility. It is threshold. When signals are strong enough and stable enough, change occurs regardless of age. This understanding removes urgency and replaces it with patience. Healing does not require racing against the clock. The body is not keeping score in years lost. It is responding to what is happening now. This is profoundly relieving for many people, because it means the present carries real power. Small changes implemented today are not insignificant because of the past. They are meaningful because they shape future signals. The body's relationship with time is also influenced by perception. When stress is chronic, time feels compressed and threatening, which reinforces defensive physiology. When safety and rhythm return, time expands. Recovery becomes more efficient because the system is no longer bracing against imagined urgency. This shift is subtle but powerful. It allows repair processes to unfold without being interrupted by constant alarms. One of the most hopeful aspects of biological timing is that systems often improve together. As sleep stabilizes, hormones regulate. As hormones regulate, energy improves. As energy improves, movement becomes easier. Each improvement reinforces the next, creating a positive feedback loop. What began as a small shift in one area becomes a cascade. This is not coincidence. It is integration. The body prefers coherence, and when coherence begins to return, it accelerates its own repair. Setbacks do not erase progress because progress is not stored in a single event. It is stored in altered thresholds and updated expectations. A stressful week does not undo months of regulation. It simply tests resilience. The body responds, then returns to baseline more quickly than before. This quicker recovery is itself evidence of change. Resilience is not the absence of stress response. It is the speed of return. Understanding biological time also helps people avoid discouragement. When progress feels slow, it does not mean nothing is happening. Much of healing occurs beneath awareness. Gene expression shifts. Inflammatory tone adjusts. Neural sensitivity recalibrates. These changes precede noticeable symptoms. By the time relief is felt, the work has already been underway for some time. Trusting this invisible phase is part of working with biology, rather than against it. The body's adaptability to time is not limitless, but it is far greater than most people assume. What limits change most often is not age or damage, but inconsistency. Mixed signals confuse the system. Clear signals guide it. When life becomes more predictable in supportive ways, biology relaxes its defenses. That relaxation is what allows repair to catch up with damage. The future does not demand that the body forget the past. It only asks that the present be convincing enough to matter more. When movement is gentle but regular, when rest is protected, when nourishment is steady, when stress is acknowledged and discharged, the body updates its internal model of the world. That updated model guides healing more effectively than any single intervention. This is why people sometimes experience rapid improvements after long periods of stagnation. The system crosses a threshold of trust. Once crossed, adaptation becomes efficient. The body does not celebrate this moment. It simply gets to work. Strength returns quietly. Pain recedes gradually. Energy stabilizes. These changes feel sudden only because the groundwork was invisible. Biological time is not a countdown. It is a conversation. Each day speaks to the body about what to expect next. When the message becomes consistent, the body responds accordingly. The past becomes context rather than destiny. Healing becomes a process rather than a race. The body moves forward not by erasing history, but by integrating it into a new pattern that better supports survival, function, and ease, allowing life to continue adapting intelligently in the present moment rather than remaining trapped by what once was, or what was endured, or what was believed to be irreversible or beyond reach. Healing is often imagined as something that requires flawless discipline, perfect routines, and dramatic effort, but the body does not operate on ideals. It operates on patterns. It is not waiting for the perfect day, the perfect plan, or the perfect version of you. It responds to what happens most often. From a biological perspective, consistency carries far more weight than intensity because consistency allows prediction, and prediction is what makes repair safe. The body is not inspired by occasional excellence. It is reassured by reliability. Every system in the body is designed to adapt gradually. Cells adjust their behavior based on repeated exposure. Hormones regulate themselves according to recurring rhythms. Neural pathways strengthen or weaken depending on how frequently they are used. None of these systems require perfection to function. They require signals that are steady enough to be trusted. When a behavior or condition repeats, even imperfectly, the body begins to treat it as the new normal and reallocates resources accordingly. This is why extreme approaches so often fail. A sudden, intense effort sends a loud signal, but it is brief. The body notices it, responds temporarily, and then waits to see what happens next. When the signal disappears, the system returns to its previous strategy, because that strategy has proven more reliable over time. Biology is cautious. It does not abandon an old pattern just because something dramatic happened once. It changes when something modest happens repeatedly. Consistency works because it reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty is expensive for body. It forces the nervous system to stay alert, to hold resources in reserve, to delay long-term investment. When daily life becomes more predictable in supportive ways, uncertainty decreases. The body no longer needs to brace itself constantly. That reduction in vigilance frees energy for repair, maintenance, and optimization. Healing accelerates not because effort increased, but because resistance decreased. This principle applies equally to physical, metabolic, and emotional health. A small amount of movement performed daily has a greater impact on joint health, circulation, and nervous system regulation than sporadic intense exercise. Regular sleep timing stabilizes hormonal rhythms more effectively than occasional long rest. Eating reasonably well most days supports metabolic repair far more than alternating between restriction and excess. The body learns from averages, not from peaks. Perfection is stressful. It introduces pressure, fear of failure, and rigidity. These states activate the nervous system's threat response, which paradoxically interferes with healing. When the body senses pressure, it interprets it as demand. When demand increases without adequate recovery, repair is postponed. This is why people can follow a perfect plan and still feel worse. The plan may look ideal on paper, but the experience of executing it is perceived as threat rather than support. Consistency, on the other hand, feels manageable. It communicates safety. A behavior that can be sustained without strain tells the body that resources are sufficient and conditions are stable. This message is subtle but powerful. It allows the system to lower defenses and invest in long-term processes. Healing becomes less about effort and more about alignment. The body also forgives inconsistency far more easily than it forgives extremes. Missing a day does not erase adaptation. A difficult week does not undo months of steady input. Biological systems are designed to tolerate fluctuation. What disrupts them is chaos, not imperfection. When supportive signals dominate over time, the occasional deviation is absorbed without consequence. This tolerance is itself a sign of resilience. Consistency builds trust, and trust is central to healing. The body must trust that rest will continue before it fully commits to repair. It must trust that nourishment will be available before it reallocates energy away from survival. It must trust that movement will be safe before it releases protective tension. Trust cannot be demanded. It is earned through repetition. Each small, repeated act of care contributes to this trust quietly, cumulatively. This is why healing often feels slow at first. The body is observing. It is collecting data. It is testing whether new patterns will last. During this phase, changes are happening beneath awareness. Gene expression shifts. Hormonal baselines adjust. Neural thresholds recalibrate. These changes do not announce themselves immediately because the system is still verifying reliability. Once trust reaches a certain threshold, visible improvements emerge more rapidly, giving the impression of sudden progress when in fact the groundwork was laid gradually. The idea that healing requires intensity comes from a misunderstanding of motivation. Humans are often motivated by urgency and fear, but biology is regulated by safety and predictability. What feels motivating to the mind may feel threatening to the body. Sustainable healing occurs when the two align, when actions feel supportive rather than coercive. This alignment is far easier to achieve through small, consistent steps than through dramatic overhauls. Consistency also respects the body's limited capacity for change at any given moment. Adaptation consumes energy. When too many changes are introduced at once, the system becomes overwhelmed. Stress increases. Compliance decreases. The nervous system interprets the situation as unstable. By introducing change gradually and maintaining it, the body is allowed to adapt without triggering defense. Healing becomes cooperative rather than confrontational. This cooperative approach is especially important in chronic conditions, where the body has often been in a state of protection for a long time. In such cases, intensity can feel invasive. Gentle, repeated signals of safety are more effective in softening long-held defenses. The body responds not to being pushed, but to being accompanied. Consistency provides that companionship. Even psychologically, consistency reshapes identity. Repeated behaviors become part of how a person sees themselves. This shift reduces internal conflict and decision fatigue, further lowering stress. When caring actions become routine rather than heroic, they stop requiring constant willpower. The nervous system appreciates this reduction in effort. It perceives life as more manageable, which supports regulation. Healing is cumulative. Each small action adds to a biological ledger. The body keeps track not of intentions, but of inputs. A few minutes of daily movement, a regular bedtime, moments of calm breathing, consistent nourishment, gentle self-talk all register as evidence. Over time, this evidence outweighs past experiences of scarcity or threat. The body updates its expectations. Repair becomes efficient because it is no longer risky. This does not mean consistency must be rigid. Flexibility is part of sustainability. The body responds well to routines that allow variation without losing their core rhythm. Walking different routes, eating varied foods within a stable pattern, adjusting intensity based on energy all signal adaptability rather than chaos. The goal is not monotony, it is reliability. Perhaps the most liberating aspect of this understanding is that it removes the moral weight from healing. There is no failure in imperfection. There is no punishment for missed days. There is only information. The body responds to what happens most often, not to what happens occasionally. This perspective replaces guilt with curiosity and pressure with patience. When people stop trying to heal perfectly and start healing consistently, they often notice a profound shift. Effort decreases. Resistance softens. The body begins to meet them halfway. This is not because they finally did everything right, but because they stopped overwhelming the system. Healing accelerates when the body feels included rather than commanded. The intelligence of the body lies in its ability to integrate small signals over time. It does not require dramatic proof. It requires steady presence. Each day that care is repeated, even imperfectly, the system becomes more confident that repair is worthwhile. That confidence translates into physiological change. Consistency is not glamorous. It rarely feels impressive. It does not produce immediate transformation, yet aligns perfectly with how biology actually works. Life evolved to respond to stable patterns, not to bursts of effort. When care becomes ordinary, healing becomes possible. The body does not need you to be exceptional. It needs you to be predictable in supportive ways. When that predictability is established, repair unfolds naturally, not as a breakthrough, but as a gradual return to balance, strength, and ease, guided by the quiet accumulation of small actions repeated often enough to matter, allowing the body's inherent intelligence to do what it has always known how to do when conditions are kind enough and steady enough and trustworthy enough to sustain it. Chronic stress does not harm a body because stress exists, but because it never truly ends. In short bursts, stress is protective. It sharpens attention, mobilizes energy, and helps the body respond to immediate challenges. This response is ancient and effective. The problem begins when stress loses its boundaries, when the nervous system cannot clearly detect resolution. In that state, the body behaves as though danger is always nearby, even when nothing visible is wrong. This constant signaling of threat reshapes physiology in quiet but profound ways. When stress remains unresolved, the body reorganizes itself around survival. Blood flow is prioritized to muscles rather than organs of repair. Digestion slows because it is not essential for immediate escape. Immune responses shift toward rapid defense rather than long-term regulation. Hormonal rhythms flatten, disrupting sleep, appetite, and energy. These changes are not mistakes. They are deliberate reallocations driven by the belief that safety is uncertain. The body does not choose comfort when survival feels at stake. Repair pathways are energy-intensive. Regenerating tissue, resolving inflammation, and maintaining cellular health require resources and time. When stress is constant, the body cannot justify this investment. It postpones repair, not because it lacks capacity, but because it lacks confidence that repair will be protected once initiated. Healing is vulnerable. It requires stillness, predictability, and surplus. Chronic stress removes all three. One of the most misunderstood aspects of stress is that the body does not distinguish well between types of threat. Physical danger, emotional conflict, financial uncertainty, unresolved grief, and persistent pressure can all activate the same biological systems. The nervous system responds to meaning, not logic. If a situation feels inescapable or unpredictable, the body reacts as if survival is at risk. This reaction can persist even when the conscious mind believes everything should be fine. Over time, chronic stress becomes a background signal of life. The nervous system recalibrates its baseline. Elevated tension feels normal. Shallow breathing feels normal. Fatigue feels normal. Pain feels normal. Because these states become familiar, they are often mistaken for aging or irreversible decline. In reality, they are signs of a system that has adapted to constant threat by narrowing its focus and conserving resources. Repair does not stop completely under stress. It becomes fragmented and inefficient. Inflammation may initiate but fail to resolve. Injuries may heal partially but leave residual sensitivity. Immune responses may become overactive or underresponsive. Sleep may occur but lack depth. These partial repairs reflect a system attempting to function under constraint. The body is doing what it can with what it has. Chronic stress also alters perception. The brain becomes more sensitive to potential danger and less sensitive to safety cues. Neutral sensations may be interpreted as threatening. Minor discomforts may feel alarming. This heightened sensitivity feeds back into the stress response, reinforcing the cycle. The body remains vigilant because the mind keeps finding evidence that vigilance is justified. One of the most damaging myths about stress is the idea that resilience means ignoring it. Suppression does not resolve stress. It prolongs it. When emotional or physiological signals are repeatedly overridden, the nervous system escalates its output to be heard. Symptoms intensify not out of spite, but out of necessity. The body increases the volume of its message when the message is not acknowledged. Repair requires resolution, not suppression. Resolution does not mean eliminating stress from life, which is neither possible nor desirable. It means completing stress responses. It means allowing activation to rise and then fall. It means giving the body clear signals that a challenge has passed. Without this closure, stress accumulates like unfinished business in the nervous system. Breathing patterns offer a clear example. Under stress, breathing becomes shallow and rapid. If this pattern persists, it continuously signals urgency to the brain. The body remains in a state of readiness. When breathing slows and deepens consistently, it communicates that immediate action is not required. This simple shift can reopen repair pathways because it changes the underlying message the body receives. Chronic stress also disrupts the body's sense of time. Everything feels urgent. There is little space for recovery. This urgency pushes the system to prioritize short-term coping over long-term maintenance. Healing becomes something to be postponed indefinitely. The body adapts by lowering expectations for repair, accepting dysfunction as the cost of survival. Importantly, the body does not choose this state consciously. It follows instructions encoded in neural firing patterns, hormonal feedback loops, and immune signaling. These systems are designed to err on the side of caution. If there is uncertainty, they assume threat. This bias toward protection has ensured survival across evolution, but in modern life, it often becomes mismatched to actual danger. Unresolved stress often hides in routine. It may not feel dramatic. It may feel like constant busyness, low-grade worry, emotional restraint, or the pressure to keep functioning despite exhaustion. The body experiences all of these as demands without resolution. Each demand adds to the signal that safety is not guaranteed. Repair continues to be delayed. The longer stress persists, the more effort it takes to shift out of it. This does not mean healing becomes impossible. It means the system requires clearer, more consistent evidence of safety. Small interventions may feel insufficient at first because the nervous system has learned not to trust brief relief. It waits to see whether new conditions will last. This is why rest alone often does not restore health when stress is chronic. Rest without safety does not communicate resolution. A weekend off does not undo months of pressure. The body needs repeated experiences of reduced demand paired with genuine relief. Only then does it begin to relax its defenses. Chronic stress also interferes with interoception, the body's ability to sense internal states accurately. Hunger cues become distorted. Fatigue signals are ignored or exaggerated. Pain perception becomes unreliable. This confusion further disrupts repair because the body loses clarity about its own needs. Healing depends on accurate feedback, and stress muddies that feedback. Social context plays a critical role in stress resolution. Humans evolved to regulate stress through connection. Feeling supported reduces threat perception. Feeling isolated amplifies it. Chronic loneliness is interpreted biologically as danger because isolation historically increased vulnerability. Repair pathways remain suppressed when social safety is lacking, regardless of other interventions. Even positive changes can be stressful if introduced without regulation. Major lifestyle shifts, intense exercise, or strict routines can add pressure rather than relieve it. The body evaluates not whether change is healthy in theory, but whether it increases or decreases perceived demand. Healing strategies that increase stress often backfire, reinforcing the very patterns they aim to resolve. Understanding stress as a signal rather than a failure changes the approach to healing. The goal becomes not forcing repair, but reducing threat. When threat decreases, repair resumes naturally. This shift requires patience because the body does not reverse protective strategies instantly. It waits for confirmation that safety is real. Resolution of chronic stress often begins with small, repeated signals of relief, predictable routines, gentle movement, moments of calm breathing, emotional expression without judgment. These signals accumulate. Each one slightly reduces a perceived need for vigilance. Over time, the nervous system lowers its guard. As vigilance decreases, subtle changes emerge. Sleep deepens. Digestion improves. Pain softens. Energy stabilizes. These changes are signs that repair pathways are reopening. The body did not need to be fixed. It needed to be reassured. Chronic stress suppresses healing not because the body is weak, but because it is loyal to survival. It will always choose protection over repair when forced to choose. The task of healing, then, is to remove that forced choice by creating conditions where protection is no longer constantly required. When stress resolves, the body does not celebrate. It simply redirects energy. Processes that were Paul's resume. Inflammation resolves more efficiently. Tissue regeneration improves. Immune balance returns. These shifts feel gradual, but they reflect a profound change in internal priorities. The most important insight is that unresolved stress is not a personal failure. It is a physiological state shaped by environment, history, and perception. Blame only adds to the stress signal. Understanding reduces it. Compassion reduces it. Consistent safety reduces it. Healing does not require eliminating all challenges. It requires closing the loop on stress responses. When activation is allowed to rise and fall, the nervous system regains flexibility. Flexibility allows repair. The body moves out of survival mode, not because life becomes perfect, but because it becomes manageable. When threat signals finally quiet, the body does what it's always been prepared to do. It repairs. It restores. It recalibrates. It returns a balance not as an act of will, but as an automatic consequence of no longer being told, moment after moment, that danger is still present and unresolved and ongoing. Biological change is not predetermined by age, past behavior, or long-standing patterns. The body is a dynamic system that constantly updates its responses based on incoming signals. Every cell, every tissue, every organ functions within a network of feedback loops that assess the present moment more than the past. While history shapes expectations, it does not dictate outcomes. Even patterns that have existed for decades can be remodeled when consistent, supportive inputs replace those that previously signaled strain, scarcity, or threat. This principle applies equally to muscle function, metabolic efficiency, neuroplasticity, and immune resilience, demonstrating the remarkable capacity for adaptation across multiple physiological systems. The misconception that long-standing patterns are permanent arises from observing slow or inconsistent change and misattributing it to biological limits rather than to the logic of adaptation. When a behavior, habit, or stress response persists, it creates a stable internal signal. The body interprets this signal as reliable information and adjusts priorities accordingly. Muscle tension, inflammation, fatigue, or metabolic imbalance are often not proof of irreversibility, but proof that the system has learned to behave in a certain way because that behavior was adaptive in previous circumstances. Recognizing this shifts the focus from lamenting the past to shaping present conditions that guide future adaptation. Neuroplasticity exemplifies this adaptability. Neural pathways, including those responsible for movement, sensation, and cognition, remain malleable throughout life. Even entrenched patterns can be altered when new experiences provide clear, consistent evidence that alternative strategies are safe and effective. A person who has avoided a certain type of movement for decades due to fear or pain can retrain motor circuits through gradual exposure and repetition. The brain recalibrates synaptic connections in response to repeated, reliable input, allowing the body to regain function and confidence. This process is gradual and often subtle, but its cumulative impact is profound. Muscle and connective tissue follow a similar principle. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass, is frequently viewed as inevitable and irreversible. While biological efficiency may decline with age, the capacity to stimulate growth through consistent mechanical load persists. Muscle fibers respond to repeated stress by synthesizing new protein, reorganizing cytoskeletal structures, and improving neuromuscular coordination. Tendons, ligaments, and fascia remodel in response to consistent strain, adjusting tensile strength and elasticity. Even decades of sedentary behavior do not permanently eliminate the body's ability to respond. They simply mean the system must be retrained with consistent, safe loading patterns. Metabolic systems are equally dynamic. Insulin sensitivity, lipid regulation, and mitochondrial efficiency are all responsive to consistent inputs, including diet, movement, and sleep patterns. Historical periods of poor nutrition or prolonged inactivity do not permanently impair metabolic function. Rather, they establish baseline expectations. When the body experiences repeated signals of nutrient sufficiency, stable energy demand, and predictable activity, Metabolic pathways recalibrate, improving energy utilization, hormonal balance, and tissue repair. This demonstrates that biological history informs the present but does not constrain future possibility. The cardiovascular system exhibits a comparable capacity for adaptation. Arteries and capillaries respond to mechanical forces and oxygen demands. Even after years of sedentary behavior, consistent aerobic engagement promotes vascular remodeling, enhances endothelial function, and improves cardiac output. Age may slow the rate of adaptation, but it does not eliminate the underlying mechanisms that support repair and growth. The system responds to repeated, reliable input, emphasizing the primacy of pattern over history. The immune system, often perceived as declining irreversibly with age, also retains flexibility. Immune cells continually assess internal and external conditions, adapting responses accordingly. Chronic inflammation, which may persist due to lifestyle factors or stress, is not permanent. By consistently signaling safety and providing supportive inputs through nutrition, rest, and manageable exposure challenges, the immune system recalibrates, reducing unnecessary activation and restoring balance. This recalibration underscores the principle that even long-standing maladaptive patterns are responsive to sustained, consistent change. Hormonal systems illustrate another layer of adaptability. Cortisol, thyroid hormones, sex hormones, and growth factors all respond dynamically to environmental and behavioral cues. Long-term patterns of stress, irregular sleep, or poor nutrition can create imbalances, but these imbalances are not unchangeable. When supportive, consistent routines are implemented, hormonal rhythms adjust, feedback loops recalibrate, and receptor sensitivity improves. These adaptations demonstrate that the body is continuously interpreting present conditions and updating systemic priorities accordingly. Psychological and behavioral patterns, which are closely linked to physiological adaptation, are similarly malleable. Chronic stress responses, fear-based avoidance behaviors, and ingrained habits all shape internal physiology through neuroendocrine signaling. When these behavioral patterns are modified through repetition, the nervous system gradually adjusts expectations. Muscle tension decreases, heart rate variability improves, and stress hormones recalibrate. This integrated response demonstrates that adaptation is not isolated to one system, but occurs across multiple interconnected networks. The interplay between systems is critical. Improvements in one domain facilitate adaptation in others. Enhanced sleep quality promotes hormonal balance, which improves metabolism, which supports tissue repair, which reduces pain perception, which enhances movement capacity, which further reinforces sleep. This cascade illustrates the cumulative nature of consistent inputs and highlights why short-term interventions often fail to produce lasting change. Systems are interdependent, and adaptation accelerates when supportive signals align across domains. Recovery from injury exemplifies the principle that long-standing patterns are reversible. Even after years of compensatory movement, scar tissue, or neural inhibition, structured, consistent rehabilitation can restore function. The body leverages dormant capacities, reorganizes pathways, and retrains motor patterns. This process underscores that permanence is a misconception. The body is designed to respond when given clear, reliable cues over time. Consistency is central to this process. Biology updates based on repeated evidence rather than isolated events. Small, daily actions, gentle movement, balanced nutrition, sufficient rest, mindful stress regulation, communicate to the body that new patterns are reliable. Over time, these inputs accumulate, shifting internal expectations and prompting systemic adaptation. The magnitude of change is determined not by intensity, but by reliability. Even deeply ingrained habits, such as chronic postural patterns or learned movement avoidance, can be remodeled through repetition. The body retains memory of function as well as dysfunction. This memory provides a raw material for adaptation when new patterns are introduced consistently. Neural circuits can strengthen alternative pathways while weakening maladaptive ones. Muscles and connective tissues can remodel, regaining flexibility, strength, and coordination. These changes may appear gradual externally, but internally, they reflect continuous adjustment at the cellular and systemic levels. Environmental factors also influence the pace of adaptation. Supportive surroundings, predictable routines, and access to restorative experiences provide the consistent signals necessary for the body to update long-standing patterns. Conversely, unpredictable or hostile conditions reinforce old patterns, prolonging maladaptive states. The principle remains the same. The body adjusts to what it experiences repeatedly. Stress management and emotional regulation are integral. Chronic psychological stress establishes patterns of sympathetic dominance, which interfere with repair, immune function, and hormonal balance. Repeated practices that signal safety, controlled breathing, meditation, mindful movement, positive social interaction, enable recalibration of the autonomic nervous system. Over time, these inputs shift baseline expectations, allowing repair pathways to resume normal function. Learning and experience also play a role. When new movements, behaviors, or lifestyle patterns are introduced consistently, the nervous system and musculoskeletal system integrate them into habitual function. Even patterns established over decades are not immutable. They are merely reinforced by repetition. Altered inputs gradually reshape these systems, illustrating the remarkable plasticity inherent in human biology. Nutrition reinforces systemic adaptation. Consistent intake of essential nutrients supports cellular repair, neurotransmitter synthesis, and hormonal regulation. Even after prolonged periods of suboptimal nutrition, repeated provision of adequate macro and micronutrients enables the body to restore function. The mechanisms of absorption, transport, and utilization respond to reliable signals, demonstrating that past deficits do not permanently prevent adaptation. Sleep is equally critical. Chronic disruption establishes patterns that affect cognitive, metabolic, and immune systems. When sleep timing and quality are restored consistently, multiple systems recalibrate, hormonal rhythms adjust, tissue repair accelerates, and cognitive flexibility improves. The body continuously evaluates present conditions, and regular restorative sleep provide a powerful cue that repair is safe and valuable. Movement and exercise illustrate the principle in both strength and endurance domains. Muscles, tendons, ligaments, and cardiovascular systems all respond to consistent mechanical and metabolic stimuli. Even after decades of inactivity, repeated exposure to appropriate loading prompts hypertrophy, improved neuromuscular coordination, enhanced vascular function, and metabolic adaptation. The body continuously interprets these patterns and adjusts structure and function accordingly. Pain modulation demonstrates plasticity as well. Chronic pain often reflects central sensitization rather than ongoing tissue damage. Consistent, graded exposure to movement and sensory experiences retrains the nervous system, reducing exaggerated responses and restoring functional capacity. This process requires repetition, patience, and reliability, reinforcing the concept that even entrenched physiological and neurological patterns are adaptable. The principle extends to mental and emotional adaptation. Long-standing anxiety, fear responses, and learned helplessness can be reshaped through consistent practice of coping strategies, cognitive reframing, and exposure to manageable challenges. The nervous system integrates these experiences over time, altering stress responsiveness, hormonal regulation, and autonomic balance. Psychological change produces physiological change, emphasizing the interconnectedness of systems. Integration across systems amplifies adaptation. Improvements in sleep, nutrition, movement, emotional regulation, and social engagement reinforce one another, creating a cumulative effect. The body responds to the pattern of inputs, not isolated interventions. This is why sustainable change requires consistency across multiple domains rather than sporadic effort in a single area. Historical patterns, even decades old, are therefore not permanent. They represent learned adaptations that can be updated when the body receives repeated, supportive signals. Consistency communicates safety, predictability, and reliability, enabling repair, growth, and functional restoration. Adaptation is ongoing. The body continuously assesses present conditions and adjusts accordingly, demonstrating that age, history, and long-standing habits influence but do not dictate physiological potential. Every repeated, positive input nudges the system toward improved function, illustrating the profound capacity of human biology to change, recover, and optimize itself when consistent conditions replace patterns of strain, scarcity, and unresolved stress. The human body is a self-organizing system that thrives on balance and rhythm, yet it is constantly challenged by modern life to maintain these states. Repair and recovery are not passive processes. They require active, consistent, and predictable signals from the environment and from one's own behavior. The body responds to patterns more than isolated events, and its internal systems are designed to adapt to repeated, reliable cues. Even when damage, dysfunction, or long-term strain has accumulated, the capacity for repair remains. The principle underlying this capacity is the body's reliance on signal over circumstance. When the system perceives safety, predictability, and sufficient resources, it reallocates energy toward regeneration rather than merely sustaining survival. Every system in the body functions within networks of feedback loops, constantly assessing whether conditions are favorable for repair. Muscle tissue requires adequate oxygen, nutrients, and mechanical stimulation. The immune system requires a balance between challenge and rest to optimize function. Hormonal systems respond to circadian cues, stress levels, and metabolic signals. Neural circuits update based on repeated experience and reinforcement. When these systems receive consistent signals that conditions are safe and resources are sufficient, repair mechanisms accelerate, often in ways that are invisible until their cumulative effects become noticeable. Repair is suppressed not because the body lacks capacity, but because it prioritizes survival over optimization when uncertainty or threat is perceived. Chronic stress, poor sleep, nutrient deficiencies, emotional tension, and inconsistent activity all signal to the body that resources may be needed elsewhere. Under these conditions, energy that could support tissue repair, immune regulation, or neuroplasticity is diverted to maintaining readiness. The result is a system that functions, but does so at a cost: slower recovery, heightened sensitivity, inflammation, and fatigue. Once consistent supportive signals are reintroduced, these pathways gradually regain function. Even tissues that have been dormant or underutilized for long periods retain intrinsic repair mechanisms. Muscles that have atrophied, joints that have stiffened, and bones that have lost density still contain the machinery necessary to rebuild. Cells within these tissues can synthesize new proteins, remodel extracellular matrices, and reorganize structural networks when mechanical load, nutrient availability, and hormonal cues are optimized consistently. The body does not forget how to repair. It simply waits for the right conditions to allocate resources. This principle underscores the importance of predictability and pattern in daily life. Small, repeated actions over time are more effective than intermittent, intense interventions. Sleep exemplifies this concept. While occasional rest is beneficial, consistent, high-quality sleep provides a sustained signal to the nervous system and endocrine pathways that conditions are safe for repair. Growth hormone release, immune cell proliferation, protein synthesis, and tissue regeneration all peak during sleep cycles. Chronic disruption of these cycles, even if minor, delays these processes because the body interprets irregular sleep as uncertainty. Restoration does not demand perfection. It demands regularity and predictability. Over time, stable sleep schedules create the environment necessary for cumulative repair. Nutrition functions similarly. The body does not require extreme dietary changes to trigger repair. It requires reliability in nutrient intake. Cells rely on amino acids, fatty acid, vitamins, and minerals for repair processes, and deficits slow these mechanisms. Providing these nutrients consistently, even in moderate amounts, communicates stability to cellular systems. Over time, this signal allows metabolic pathways to optimize energy allocation, inflammation to decrease, and tissue regeneration to proceed efficiently. Historical deficiencies do not prevent repair. Repeated correction gradually reshapes systemic function. Movement is another critical factor in repair. Mechanical stimulation prompts musculoskeletal adaptation, supports circulation, and facilitates neurofeedback loops that reinforce coordination and balance. Muscles and joints adapt based on the frequency, intensity, and duration of loading rather than the total number of years of inactivity. Gentle, repeated movements provide the system with data that mobility is safe and beneficial. Over time, these small, consistent patterns promote muscle growth, improve joint range of motion, and enhance proprioception, demonstrating that the body remains adaptable even after long periods of disuse. The nervous system plays a central role in regulating repair processes. Chronic stress or perceived threat signals the need for vigilance, which suppresses restorative mechanisms. The autonomic nervous system prioritizes sympathetic activation over parasympathetic activity, diverting energy from repair. Consistent experiences of safety, calm breathing, predictable routines, supportive social interaction, and controlled physical activity signal to the nervous system that energy can be safely redirected toward healing. Repeated reinforcement of safety cues gradually shifts baseline neural activity, allowing repair processes to resume at full capacity. The interdependence of bodily systems amplifies the importance of consistent, supportive behavior. Improvements in one area often cascade to others. Stabilized sleep enhances hormonal balance, which improves metabolism, which supports tissue regeneration, which reduces pain perception, which facilitates movement, which further reinforces sleep quality. Each system responds to repeated, predictable input, and as signals accumulate, the body's overall capacity for repair strengthens. This interconnectedness demonstrates why isolated interventions, while helpful, rarely achieve the same magnitude of effect as coordinated, repeated efforts across multiple domains. The immune system illustrates adaptability through repair. Chronic inflammation, often maintained by prolonged stress, sedentary behavior, or poor nutrition, suppresses regenerative processes. By consistently signaling safety through supportive behavior, the immune system recalibrates, reducing unnecessary activation and allowing tissue repair to progress. These adjustments are gradual, often unnoticed initially, but they represent the body's responsiveness to the environment and internal signals rather than the permanence of damage. Hormonal regulation is similarly influenced by repeated patterns. Cortisol, thyroid hormone, sex hormones, and growth factors all respond dynamically to environmental and behavioral cues. Chronic dysregulation slows repair because energy is diverted toward immediate coping. When consistent patterns of sleep, stress management, and nutrition are maintained, hormonal rhythms adjust, receptor sensitivity improves, and repair mechanisms regain efficiency. These systems do not require perfection. They require repetition and reliability to recalibrate effectively. Even long-standing pain patterns demonstrate the capacity for repair. Central sensitization often maintains chronic pain despite structural healing. The nervous system's response is shaped by repeated experiences. Gentle, graded exposure to movement, sensory modulation, and supportive behavioral interventions provide consistent evidence to the system that the body is safe. Over time, this repeated reinforcement reduces exaggerated neural responses, allowing functional repair to proceed. Healing occurs not because the pain is forcibly eliminated, but because the nervous system adjusts its expectations in response to reliable input. Consistency also fosters psychological adaptation, which indirectly supports physiological repair. Long-standing anxiety, avoidance, and learned helplessness reinforce sympathetic dominance and stress hormone release, which in turn suppress repair. Consistent engagement in safe challenges, mindfulness practices, and social connection recalibrates neural circuits, reduces chronic stress signaling, and restores autonomic balance. These psychological adjustments create conditions that favor systemic repair, illustrating the intimate connection between mind and body in healing. The concept of cumulative adaptation underscores the value of persistence over intensity. Minor actions performed repeatedly accumulate in their effect, whereas sporadic, extreme efforts may be ignored or resisted by the body. The system interprets consistency as reliability, which reduces perceived threat and allows energy to flow toward repair. Over time, this accumulation produces changes that appear dramatic externally, though they are the result of gradual internal recalibration. Historical dysfunction, whether due to injury, aging, sedentary behavior, or chronic stress, does not eliminate repair capacity. It establishes baseline expectations that can be updated through repeated, supportive inputs. The body evaluates reliability over time. Each consistent signal that resources are sufficient, threats are minimal, and recovery is possible reinforces systemic trust. As trust accumulates, repair mechanisms operate with increasing efficiency, demonstrating that the body retains a capacity for adaptation regardless of past challenges. The environment also influences repair. Predictable routines, access to restorative spaces, and exposure to natural rhythms enhance the body's perception of safety, promoting parasympathetic activation and repair processes. Conversely, chaotic, unpredictable environments reinforce defensive strategies and suppress repair. By shaping the environment to provide repeated, predictable support, individuals enhance the body's intrinsic capacity to rebuild and recover. Repair is further facilitated by integrating multiple systems simultaneously. Sleep, movement, nutrition, emotional regulation, and social connection interact synergistically. Improvement in one domain supports improvements in others, producing a cascade effect. The body responds to patterns across these domains, not isolated interventions. The cumulative impact of small, consistent actions across multiple systems dramatically enhances overall repair capacity. Consistency, repetition, and predictability are the guiding principles for reactivating the body's inherent repair mechanisms. The body is not waiting for perfection or dramatic intervention. It responds to patterns that indicate safety, availability of resources, and reliability of support. Each repeated, supportive input strengthens systemic function, recalibrates internal expectations, and allows repair mechanisms to operate at their full potential. Historical deficits or long-standing dysfunction do not preclude this capacity. They merely establish patterns that can be updated through consistent, reliable action. Even subtle interventions, when repeated, produce cumulative effects. Gentle daily movement, adequate hydration, nutrient-rich meals, restorative sleep, calm breathing, positive social interaction, and predictable routines collectively signal to the body that energy can safely be allocated toward regeneration. Over weeks, months, and years, these repeated signals shift systemic priorities, accelerate tissue repair, improve neuroplasticity, and restore functional balance. The body's intelligence lies in its responsiveness to repeated patterns rather than in its response to isolated events. Trust in the body's inherent capacity for repair is essential. The body does not need coercion or perfection. It requires consistent evidence that repair is safe and supported. As these repeated inputs accumulate, the system reallocates energy toward healing, gradually restoring balance across muscular, neural, metabolic, immune, and hormonal networks. The visible outcomes of repair, strength, mobility, energy, and resilience, emerge over time as a cumulative effect of these internal recalibrations. Ultimately, the human body retains a remarkable capacity for repair throughout life, even after decades of strain, inactivity, or dysfunction. This capacity is realized not through extremes or perfection, but through repeated, reliable, and supportive patterns. Each consistent action reinforces systemic trust, reallocates energy toward regeneration, and strengthens interconnected physiological networks. Repair is a process that unfolds gradually, guided by the body's responsiveness to patterns rather than isolated events, demonstrating that even long-standing deficits can be restored when consistency, reliability, and supportive input are maintained over time.